Today, this is going to be our exclusive video interview with the head of guitar of Tech Music School in London, Guitarist, if you prefer. Some people remember that school, and I was one of those, generation 2008, and John used to be my teacher at the time. John is the head of guitar department there, as I said, and a contributor to several world famous guitar magazines. Then author of a book, Improvising Blues Guitar, and performs in two bands, one fusion band, one gypsy jazz quintet, and a lot of other things we're gonna talk about. I'm gonna let you talk. And first of all, thank you for
you're welcome.
For your time.
Great, I'm looking forward to
coming here, talking to our fans. John has recently published a series of 5 articles nailing the changes on blues guitar, something like that. Yeah, and hopefully we're gonna see more of that in the future. So
yeah, absolutely.
John, welcome to this interview. There's gonna be some playing later on, some useful licks, and hopefully everyone's gonna enjoy this. So how are you doing today?
Great, yeah, really good.
These days, I've read that you're touring a lot with your...
Playing a lot, yeah, trying to play as much as possible. So a variety of different things, playing with lots of different lineups, but mainly in the jazz idiom and jazz rock and fusion. Yeah, keeping really busy.
Abroad as well?
Yes, yeah. Just did some gigs in Spain recently. I'm off to Italy in a few weeks. So yeah, it's going well. Things are going well.
Can we talk a bit about your position as a head of guitar department? So that's a big responsibility for that school. And
yeah, it's a privilege.
There when we talk about guitar, and how is it like being a leader of such a department, and what is that exact role apart from teaching guitar?
Well, the teaching's the fun bit. The teaching's the bit that you know. I mean, you know, with these schools are like, and sometimes they're long days. You know, you could be teaching 9 hours or whatever, and near enough straight. But that for me is great. You know, the day flies by. The playing and the teaching for me are a joy. You know. I really enjoy it. It's great. The other responsibilities are things like putting together the course material beforehand. So, for example, another one of the reasons why I'm not recording acoustic guitar tracks over the last week is because I've been writing new courses. Oh. Now, it's like a lot of things that you write.
Refreshing the material every year, or you're using?
It's new courses. I mean, I think because the school's moving to Fulham, and a new structure, which is actually better for me because there was a period where my role of head of guitar involved a lot of stuff outside the classroom, a lot of administration, and a lot of to do with things that were not really directly related to the teaching, which I've got to be honest, I did it because it was part of the job, and I don't think I would be getting myself into trouble with any of the bosses there or whatever if I said I just did it because it was part of the job. It was a necessary thing to do.
But you just said it live.
But they're the it was a necessary thing to do to allow me to go into the classroom and teach. And it's one of those things. In every job, there's aspects of the job that you think, well, you know what? This isn't what I'm cut out to do. I'm cut out to play the guitar. In recent years, it's gone more in the direction that my responsibilities are more to do with what goes on in the classroom. So that means supporting the other teachers. It means also having a role in selecting who those teachers are going to be, and then also putting together course material, and that means reviewing and also generating new material, which is the interesting stuff. You know,
what does one have to go through in order to get a normal teaching job in such schools?
Well, it's a funny thing. You know what? I think it's going to change. Right. I think it's going to change in years to come, because I think I was kind of just at that point where music education become or became more of an expected thing. So meaning, when I started teaching guitar, there were no real sort of qualifications for electric guitar. So therefore, none of the teachers were expected to have qualifications to teach electric guitar because they didn't exist.
Yeah.
So it was not possible to have studied electric guitar formally to teach. So my generation and the generation before me, the predecessors, they got into those roles based initially on their professional experience. I think because they'd been playing professionally and they garnered a certain amount of respect professionally, it got them into teaching situations. And I was kind of the combination of those two things. So I started teaching pretty much.
What would the upcoming generation expect?
I think it's becoming more expected, right? For example, what happened after when I first started teaching at the school in London, within a couple of years, the talk was about that for anyone to teach on a specific course, they needed to have that qualification or beyond. So there was a massive kind of a move towards getting the workforce qualified. Whereas previous to that, no one had even spoken about these things. So you find the generation above me, you know, the generation before me, very few of those guys would have studied in a formal way or would have gained formal qualifications. But I think if we go forwards 20 years into the future, I think that'll be an expected thing, will be, you know, to have a degree or a teaching qualification or something.
Yeah, and the demand for that isn't that high. For I think as there are no that many schools for contemporary music.
Well, I mean, I think that,
So for these
yeah.
new generations, if you have, for example, 100 students in one generation, they all have to go somewhere. Okay, half of them
I understand what
end
you're
up
saying.
working in a pub. Few of them have a band.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe 10 to teach privately, and another 20 would like to have a job like you.
Yeah,
So,
I understand.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think there are other avenues for music education. So, for example, when I was first learning to play, say, a style of music like jazz, myself and a friend of mine just used to get together in a room like this and play. Literally just play every week. This chap then decided to go to Leeds, got his degree from Leeds College, and now he's head of music in a secondary school. So even though you might say he didn't achieve his goals to be Pat Metheny or what have you, but you know he's achieving a respectable living, and you know he's got his own house and he's got a family and so on, and that comes from you know, you could say it's like a lot of things. You know, I think the thing about studying music formally, right, is, and this is something that usually parents of students say if they come to open days or whatever, they say, what will having a degree in music do? You know, what's the guarantee? And it's kind of like having a degree in a language or a degree in art, say, or a qualification in any of those skills. I think there's transferable skills is what the employment sector says. But the way I see it is if I'm serious about being a musician, for me the most important thing would be, if I were in that position, the most important thing, the priority would be amassing the skill set, and the qualification is that's not the target. The target would not be to qualify. Because remember, you can qualify with 40%.
Yeah, I know that.
You're not going to get a gig with 40%. Do you know? Does that make sense? Now, that's not to dismiss.
I got a few 40s because I was late.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. If you're a 40% level student,
even with all that hard work, you still need a bit of luck.
yeah, absolutely. And I think you need to be proactive. I think it's more than even a little bit of luck. I think you need to, like, okay, musicians by very nature tend to be idealistic. It comes with being creative. I think it's part and parcel of the character, the personality of a musician generally means that they're idealistic. Now, the music business, unfortunately, is not idealistic. You need to be realistic, and you need to temper the two. So I think you need to be proactive. So, for example, there are students, right, ex-students, if we go back to the first thing that we said, right, that are now active in the music industry. You just come back from a really long tour. Right? I could have told you that the minute that within a couple of days of meeting you, I could have told you that if I meet you in 5 years down the road after you graduate, you're going to have a guitar in your hands and you're going to be active as a musician. Because you didn't wait till you graduated to become an active musician. You already were.
Yeah, my last album was on the second year of university.
Well, there you go. Right. So imagine that there's a difference between that type of student, if you want to use that word, right, and then also between the guy who kind of thinks, well, what's the bare minimum I need to do to pass the course? Because there are some of those. I mean, I'm not suggesting that that's the majority or that that's a typical thing, but there are some students who are going to say, okay, what do I need to do to kind of just about pass the course? Now, just experience tells me that you're saying these guys are going to go out and work in the pub, and well, it's more likely to be those guys than
I see some of them. That's why I say that.
yeah, than to be the person who first year in is like eager, going, okay, I'm a guitar player. There's a room over there full of drummers. Go and introduce yourself to the drummers, right? There's the singers, right? They all want to work and they want to play. Hello, I'm here to play. I want to get the most out of this. If you engage with the whole experience, then I think you've got more likelihood to move on as a musician. But that's the same anywhere. For example, I know some, sure we all do. Everyone can point at some amazing guitar player, or drummer or bass player or whatever, who doesn't get any gigs, who doesn't work, who musicians don't know because they've not done that. They've not done that kind of getting out and meeting musicians. I get 95%, maybe that's a bit high, 85% of the work that I get, right, is the phone rings and people ring me because they've seen me doing something else or they know someone. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think I've ever auditioned for anything.
You'll get a few useful advices from this one, and this is exactly what we would like to present. How all this stuff from beginning to through the career of a professional guitarist looks like, and what they could expect, and so they might find themselves in this story. And,
well, I mean, unfortunately, it's one of the downsides of if you lived your guitar playing or musical life exclusively online. I think that's one facet. That's like, for example, you need to get your practicing sorted out. You need to get your equipment sorted out. You also need to, for me, that's the fun part as well. Is meet other players.
What do you think about this expansion of internet guitar lessons?
Brilliant, fantastic, yeah.
In one way it's fantastic, but do you agree that person still needs someone to point him in the right direction, face to face, to tell him, hey, the internet doesn't tell you your hand is positioned completely wrong.
Well, yes and no. I don't think. I think it doesn't necessarily need to be a guitar player that does it. I've learned some of the what were actually the hardest lessons at the time and most difficult to take, because nobody likes direct criticism, or sometimes people don't like the truth being pointed out to them, which has happened to me on occasion. But some of the most effective lessons that I've learned have come from non-guitar players. So a saxophone player at one time on a gig absolutely roasted me at the end of the gig. And told me pretty much everything that I was doing wrong, and that was hard to take at the time, but I'm glad now. At the time I denied.
I think he was right. Yeah.
No, he's completely right, absolutely right, 100% right. And that came from just playing with the guy, and like.
And that's the guy from the band. Yeah?
No, this was years ago. When I was first trying to play jazz, I made the mistake that many players do. I'm sure I'm not the only one, of thinking that it was just a collection of licks. You just connect licks, and then another lick, and then another lick.
Without actually understanding what's going on.
Yeah, or without developing them. And what would happen is I'd be okay for 3 tunes. Yeah. And then tune 4 comes, and then I've blown it. I've blown everything that I know, and all I can do is kind of go back to the start and start playing the licks again, And this dude could just seemingly play like forever, It felt like he could just keep going and wouldn't never repeat.
Every moment is a new start.
Yeah, it felt like that. And I tried to get some lessons from him, and he wasn't interested. And he said, "Oh, you want to learn to play the saxophone?" I was like, "No, I want to learn how to improvise, you know, over through this, because I've been playing rock for a while, jazz was new to me, or fairly new to me. And, you know, I'd be okay in a music shop or in a jam or whatever, because you only have to play for 5 minutes. You know, but then when you go to play on a gig and you have to play for 2 hours, then you think, okay, well, maybe I need to find... It's a bit like learning a language, I guess. You know, I could probably order a coffee in French, but have a conversation, you know, from different perspectives. Forget it, I don't understand the vocabulary well enough, you know, I'm not good enough, you know. And he basically told me where I was going wrong, you know, and said, you know, you don't develop any of your ideas. You play more ideas in one solo than I play all night, but you don't finish any of them. That was pretty much the thrust of what he was saying. You know? He said, no sooner have you started something than you've moved on to something else, you know. And he was absolutely right. You know, now I think...
How long did it take you then to...
Well,
has he heard you recently?
No, I would like to hear him now. I'd like to meet him again. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't unpleasant, you know. He got a bit drunk, actually, to be honest. He got a bit drunk, and I was running him home at the end of the gig, and you can obviously see he didn't initially want to say this because he knew that I might have got upset, you know. And he goes, "Your problem is," and then once he'd started, he couldn't stop, you know. And I thought, right, okay. But he was absolutely right, you know, because the other problem was that, for example, I was transcribing furiously at the time, and all I would transcribe would be the kind of like the pinnacle of the solo, the flashy bit, because that was the bit that I liked, you know. So my playing was just a combination of bar 11 and 12, you know, of a 12 bar or whatever, you know, just all of that, and I didn't have the first 10 bars, you know. It was just all the kind of the peak of the solo, like a big flashy 16th note phrase, but no way to get there, you know. But I didn't realise when I actually listened to these things again, I realised that we kind of get round to that. It would be like a boxer who could only do knockout punches, you know. Do you know what I mean? Now that's fine if you get the opportunity to do that, but most of the time, you know, he's not going to get to that point because there's all the other work that you need to do to get to that situation. You know? So the point I'm trying to make is sometimes these experiences, you know, the things that you can learn, I think you need to kind of like go out in the field, as it were. It's a bit like I can practice at home playing over backing tracks, you know, and everything works great, and then you go on a gig and...
is it good having someone to point you rather than reading thousands of different things? Everyone says different.
Right.
This is right, this is wrong, and you, especially for beginners, they never know which one is right. You know?
Well, I mean, I think it's helpful. I mean, I think it's helpful to have someone who you trust, who you can mentor you or coach you, whether or not it necessarily needs to be someone who sits down in a formal way and says, okay, well, it's like a lesson. Yeah. Then that's different for each and everyone. You know, I think, you know, there are plenty of great guitar players in the world, you know, who say they're self-taught, right? But I mean, I kind of question that, to be honest. How do we define self-taught? I mean, if you listen to a Jimi Hendrix album and transcribe all the licks from that album, then how are you self-taught? Do you know what I mean? Or you go and buy Guitar World and you read a lesson that Martin's written or whatever, then how can you... But those guitar players still swear that they're self-taught. How is that different than sitting at the back of a class and someone says this is the Dorian mode, you know? So I studied music formally. I went to a music college in Liverpool, and the one of the things that I enjoyed about that now was the fact that it was mixed instruments. So my classmates played the French horn and the trumpet and the violin and so on. So you go into a theory lesson with a guy play the organ and he'd go, here's the harmonic minor scale. And I'd be thinking, how do I play that on the guitar? And it would be pointless asking him because he didn't know, you know. Do you know what I mean? Because he wasn't a guitar player. Now, what that means is the motivated students, which I was at the time, because I was fiercely motivated, would find out. Would make it my business to find out. I used to do things like, there was a music shop over the road from where I lived, and my postman used to go into the music shop to skive off work, right? And I'd go in at lunchtime and hassle him to show me Jimi Hendrix licks, you know? And he'd show me them just to get me out the way, you know?
Can you demonstrate how you started? What was the
blues rock?
That when you took guitar, usually people...
Pentatonic.
Open chords and...
Yeah. And pentatonic lines.
Few Hendrix licks or Smoke on the Water.
All of those things. Position one. know, this E form pentatonic scale. Before I even knew what an E form pentatonic scale was, you know.
Did you do warm-up exercises for it?
No, not at first. No, not at first. I used to just play, find out what key the tune was in and solo over it. That'd be the thing. And who knows how long, you know. I started playing quite young, but didn't consider it to be structured in any way. I played violin beforehand, and I hated that because it was too structured. And then I switched to bass, actually, electric bass. Not because I had any not because I had any kind of desire to play the bass. It was just that's what someone had for sale, and they said electric, and before they'd even said guitar or bass, I'd said yes. You know, do you want to buy my electric? Yes. You know, I didn't care whether it was bass or guitar. And then when it arrived, it had 4 strings, and then I realised that I picked out all the guitar licks on it. You know, I would learn all the guitar solo phrases and so on. And just learn by ear initially, by imitation, and by rewinding tapes and records and so on. And getting it wrong a lot, actually, getting it wrong. But gradually over time, I think my aim became better so that I could hear something.
As you progress,
yeah, and relate. And then just picking things up. As I say, there was a music shop over the road from me, from my house, and a guy who used to deliver the mail played guitar, and he could play Jimi Hendrix. And that was the first time I actually saw someone in the flesh who could actually, rather than on a record, I actually saw somebody with my own eyes who could do this stuff, and it blew my head off.
Realized,
yeah.
Oh man, I was doing it all wrong.
yeah. And he'd help me, you know. I mean, I think I was a pain in the arse, to be honest. And I think he'd help me because he wanted to get rid of me, you know. And he'd go, if I show him one thing, he'll leave me alone, you know. Yeah. So, you know, he kind of go, you know, he does it. And, you know, and I was like, wow. And I'd rush off and kind of get that together. And then I thought I kind of could play the guitar, and then someone played me a Van Halen album, and then it all went wrong. Yeah, and I thought, okay, right. So then everything's moved considerably, like further away.
And so, how long was that period until you actually started entering the theory world?
Oh, yeah, probably a long time. I've been playing since I was about 10, and then probably until I was about 16 or 17 before I actually figured out what I was doing. It was just playing, and not even really thinking about it too much from a guitar perspective. It was mainly about getting together with friends and just making a racket, you know.
Yeah, but that's how it usually starts.
Yeah.
In order to achieve a respectable level, would you agree that theory, people should know theory?
It helps, yeah, absolutely. When I left school, and I really thought, well, I fancy doing this, and I went to music college. And I had a great teacher, Earl Howarth, his name was. He was 70-something, maybe even 80 at that point. And he went over things like rudiments of music, key signatures. And by which time I'd heard people like Van Halen. So I was kind of okay from a physical perspective, as in I could kind of move my fingers around, you know. And so technically I wasn't too bad, but theoretically I was poor. I didn't really know much about what I did theoretically. You know, I kind of know that there'd be one pentatonic shape here and then another one here, and then everything else would be by ear. You know, I'd kind of figured it out by ear. And I thought there's got to be a better way. And then I sought out some musicians and teachers that could help me. So I went to music college and learned about the mechanics of music, not necessarily as to how it relates to guitar. So then I realised I was kind of okay with that, and I consistently worked on that. And then I came to London. I got a scholarship to go to Guitar Institute at the time. That's how I met Sean Baxter and Alan Limbrick and Lee Hodgson and those guys. And I got a 10-week course paid for. And that was great because, that was probably 19, I would say. Yeah, by which time I kind of really jumped into theory, and I had questions about theory, some things that I couldn't resolve by myself. Right. So I kind of got to a certain point that I understood, and then I had some questions. So that time was really good because I think rather than, and this is a theory I've got about lessons, I think they work really well if you know what you want to get out of them. All right, so I think for me that was quite easy. So they allocated me just by luck, for not by design really. They allocated me with Sean Baxter for this 10-week block, and I went into the first lesson, and the arrogance of youth, I walk into the first lesson, and Sean says, "Come on, let's play," and I said, "I didn't want to touch the guitar." I
remember my first lesson.
yeah. I'd never heard this guy play, but like, man, let's put your guitar away, because he was going to show me alternate picking exercises and all this. I was like, I'm okay with all that stuff. I've got more than enough of this stuff, to last me a lifetime. I'm okay with inventing that stuff. What I need to know about is this scale generates these chords, and to do with various theoretical issues that I hadn't quite got to grips with, things like melodic minor scales and where they might be employed and so on. There was a few things that I hadn't quite got correct, and he put me straight, really put me straight. And I thought, awesome, that's brilliant, put me in the right direction. So then I continued to practice, like with a voracious appetite. Remember, at that time, when I would have been about 18, 19, was about the time when the guitar video lesson explosion occurred. Within a very short space of time, REH and Hot Licks had come out. So you could get that Frank Gambale thing and those Paul Gilbert videos. And I mean, I just man, I could tell you the jokes they tell, in between the licks. I mean, I know those videos word for word, lick for lick. So, and then I was buying Guitar Player magazine religiously and working through Frank Gambale's columns and just anything that was there. So going back to actually your point about the difference between being self-taught and then maybe occasionally having someone who can guide you along the way. That's sort of how I saw my relationship with Sean. I think he saw it the same thing, would be, I wouldn't go in there and say, teach me whatever you want to teach me. It was like, okay, I've been working on this and I've hit a brick wall, right? And he could kind of go, push me that direction.
He was helpful to me.
Yeah, amazing. Some other guys as well.
We hope that we're gonna have Sean soon.
I'm sure for
our website. So you mentioned there are two things I would like to discuss. Your role as a columnist in several guitar magazines to tell us how it's like to write for a magazine, and what do you actually get out of that? Is it self-promotion? Is it enjoyment? Is it money? Is it what?
It's enjoyment. It's enjoyment once it's done. Beforehand, it's.
But there's a lot of work.
Stress.
I see every single month you have like 5 pages, columns. You have to record all these backing tracks, transcribe it, write text about it, and.
Well, I think the best thing about it for me, the thing that I made a decision to do this really. Some guys write for the magazines and they just enjoy transcribing, for example. They're just really good at transcribing. So they'll pretty much do anything, I don't mean that in a disparaging way. What I mean is, the guys will ring up and say, can you transcribe some song by, I don't know, Green Day or whatever, or could you transcribe a song by the Steve Morse Band or whatever, Now, much as that's a great skill, and it's there's definitely a plus side to doing that kind of work. I kind of decided for me that wasn't really what I wanted to get from it. I would rather talk about styles of music that I'm passionately moved by, and then also more concerned about the actual mechanics of how someone might be thinking. So in actual fact, all the stuff I transcribe for, say, Guitar Techniques magazine, pretty much every month I put a disclaimer in saying, you can learn these licks if you want, but it's not that important. What's important is you get the idea behind it. I'm more concerned with why someone might play it than what they play.
Write whatever you want.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, it takes a little while. I mean, obviously, they don't just kind of, like the first commission, say, do whatever you feel like. I think just over a period of time, they develop trust that you're not going to write a load of garbage, you know.
So how long have you been working for
Ooh.
guitar techniques?
The first one I did was something like GT 100 or something like that, and they're on 224 now. Yeah, and I'm a week late. Sorry.
Well done. And what
It's a long.
other magazine find you?
I've written sporadically for Guitarist magazine, although they've decided to focus less on tuition. So I do occasionally. I do their once a year. They do a big tuition spot once a year. I've done a few of those for them. Total Guitar again. When I first started writing for magazines, I did do Total Guitar and Guitarist and Guitar Techniques. That was kind of stressful hitting the deadlines. I don't know how anyone works for a newspaper, right, is not a complete nervous wreck. You know, we're trying to hit deadlines all the time. I think that they realise that I'm going to be late, so they give me the wrong deadlines now. Yes. So, yeah. If I had to suspect that, I think if we're being truthful, there's the real deadline and there's John's deadline, which is a few weeks before. But that's just my suspicion. Yeah.
Are you still doing it?
Yeah, it's great. Do you know? I get it. Do you know what? I'm joking. I mean, there's a little bit of pressure to do with, you know, because obviously what you don't want to do is there's two things you've got to balance. And the first one is doing a killer job, because the thing I like about Guitar Techniques is that they're really generous with giving the contributor the credit for generating the material. So they put a picture in there, they profile the writers at the front. There are some other guitar publications where they don't even mention who'd written the article, and you could read an article on Vinnie Moore's guitar style or whatever and have no idea who's written this article. They don't kind of...
No, I think that is important.
So with that in mind, I think that's really generous, but then there's a bit of pressure that, you know, at no point do I ever want to produce something that's below par. You know, I want to make certain that it's something that you know, I'm aware of the fact that you know, that there's going to be thousands of guitar players listening to this stuff, you know. So if there's a problem with it, if it's not cleanly played, or if it doesn't sound anything like, if it's meant to be a particular artist's say, if it doesn't sound like them, then, you know, I'm sure, you know, I speak for everyone who writes for that magazine, you know, we do go to great pains to get it right. And I think sometimes, you know, some of the guys there kind of think we overdo it, you know. They're like, oh, you're just perfectionists, and like, but I think it's part of, again, you know, I think hopefully the reason why they asked me to do it in the first place is because they trust that I'm going to do a good job. Now, unfortunately, what that means is that it does take a little bit of time, because I'm not happy to just throw something down first take, and, you know, I'm super critical. It's one of the issues, I guess, with recording, where you're not only are you the performer, but you're the engineer and the producer, is you can tend to be super self-critical about things. You end up taking 10 takes when really the first one was okay. But you know, but from a playing perspective, I find that I get a lot from it, from the research, because what the reader sees is the tip of the iceberg. You know, so at the minute I'm writing an article on Robert Johnson's style. So I'll probably listen to, I mean, there isn't that much of his music around, but say it was someone who's got a more comprehensive back catalogue, I might listen to like 5 or 6 albums 3 or 4 times. You know, driving around in the car, Van Halen, say. Yeah, well, so at the end of that, and I know, you know, I can pretty much anticipate what Van Halen's going to do, you know. So the person who gets the most out of it, I always find, the one who learns the most from these articles is me. Yeah. Which is why I'm careful.
You can imitate the style.
Yeah, but it isn't because I necessarily want to imitate the style. What it's about is, the way I see it is, whilst, okay, maybe that's the objective in the magazine article, but what I'm at pains to point out is, that's not what I would want to do it for. I want to do it because if I hear, say, a particular guitar player employ a certain concept, I think, well, do I ever do that? Do I ever use anything like that in my playing? And do I do it so well, you know? And if I don't, then I'll fix it. You know, so I'll fix it. So for argument's sake, I've been transcribing some Scott Henderson recently, and I realised that he's really good at incorporating lots of fourth intervals. So I kind of dispensed with the Scott Henderson licks and then just started improvising using fourth intervals. So what comes out in the end sounds nothing like
yeah, I understand, but he triggered the
Exactly.
thing.
That's what we're after, is the trigger. That's what, because, you know, ultimately, you know, I've got this expression that I use when I'm teaching. Sometimes I say about trying to travel light to the gig, you know, like meaning, and this all boils down to what that saxophone player said to me, you know, like you play licks, yeah, it's all about licks, and you play thousands of licks, and now hopefully don't play that many licks. I'm sure that there are licks there, of course, but not intentionally. I don't kind of think, oh, I'm going to play this idea and then this idea and that idea. What I travel with now are concepts. Think, okay, well, maybe I'll take this rhythmic idea or this idea of development where you might take a particular melody and
build up on it. Yeah.
exactly. And so that's what I try to stress on that in the magazine. So rather than it being, you want to play Robert Johnson, here's 5 Robert Johnson licks, just learn them. All right. Which you could do, you know. I don't see what there is to be learned from that. You'd practice them and then 3 weeks later forget them.
But the concept behind the thing, it's more important rather than...
That's everything, yeah. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I could literally take the licks and go and throw them away. Because, you know, I can't play any of them. If you said to me now, Guitar Techniques article, magazine, 215, you did Steve Lukather to play me those licks, I can't play any of them, you know, because I don't commit them to memory. But if you said he used a particular device, hopefully, if you come and see me play, you might go, oh, there's that thing that he wrote about him.
Okay, speaking about that, we haven't played much today, anything.
Okay.
You holding the guitar, so, but I'm thinking of actually presenting something useful to our readers.
Okay.
There are a lot of beginners that are struggling with the term chord modes.
Okay.
And especially these big rock beginners, that they are the ones that want to learn licks, or what I call that sort of people, that they're starting from the end rather than from the beginning.
Yeah, it's a good expression. Yeah, I'm going to steal. There you go. There's an expression I'm going to steal.
When they get to the point that they want to understand what they're actually doing, then I tell them, for that kind of understanding, you would need to learn modes to understand what stands behind it. And once you say that, they are more scared of that than if they go to doctor, you know.
Yeah, I understand.
Would your advice be, in an easy and painless way, how to approach learning modes? These simple ones, major scale modes.
Major scale modes. Okay, well, I mean, I think the first thing that's off-putting is the names. So because we have to learn a big fancy name like Mixolydian or Lydian or whatever, we think that we're actually doing something like super complicated, like as if it's really, really complicated. And it's not really. It's just a question of seeing a pattern, but a pattern goes in a circle. So if the pattern goes in a circle, we can look at that pattern from any points of the circle, view it from a different perspective, and it gives us a different take on the information that's contained within. So the first thing is to become super comfortable with the step pattern. The step pattern of tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. In fact, what I would do is I would write that, I would take a circle, divide the circle into 7. Yeah, learn the pattern of, so if I were in E, I could go. So that's the tone, tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone. Now,
which they call Ionian mode.
Ionian mode.
Major scale.
Exactly. Now, all that happens with the other modes, the subsequent modes, is we just turn the circle, we spin it like the roulette wheel, you know. Or like imagine a dartboard where is it 5? What's next to the 20? A 1 and a 5? Where the 5's on the top, not the 20. Yeah. So all the numbers in the same place. You've just spun it around a little. So you might look at it and not recognize it as a conventional dartboard. So we spin the step pattern. So instead of it being tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, we take that first tone and stick it on the end. So now it goes tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, tone. It gives us a different sound. So it's the same pattern, but a completely different sound. So major is. The second step pattern is.
Yeah, but that's now relative to something else.
See, there's the Dorian mode. So so if we forget about the word Dorian mode, if we say it's a major scale pattern, but seen from the perspective of the second note, we treat the second note like that's the note of gravity, and we get a completely different sound. And I think that's a kind of a cool way of looking at modes, rather than saying, oh well, it's this scale from this note. Or the problem with that is if you say, well, it's the major scale from a different place, and you just hear it like the major scale all the time, then the major scale is such a kind of strong, it's got such strong resolutions within it that all that happens sometimes when you play that to a student is they just hear major scale. They don't hear it like it's something new. It sounds like a major scale. Now we can repeat this with all 7 modes. So the next pattern, so remember we had tone, tone, semitone. So now we're going to treat it as if we count from the third one. That's going to give us semitone, tone, then 3 tones, then semitone, tone. So we get and semitone, tone, and that's the Phrygian mode. Kind of Spanish sounding. And so on and so forth. And you can go through all 7 like so.
And now, can you demonstrate how to connect between 2 or 3 different modes?
Yeah.
Say
Yeah.
2, 5, 1.
Well, I mean, I think the thing to do then, right? So there's kind of a couple of steps in between, but we can go through them very quickly.
So people learn modes, and they say, "Now, what now?"
Okay, so then it's about relating these things to a chord. So each of those modes is related to a chord, right? So if we want to treat it like 7th chords, say we're looking at just 7th chord vocabulary. So we take the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th. Those 4 notes. So there's 4 notes there represent a major 7 chord. So that means if I play a major 7 chord, and I put it into a more finger-friendly position, that's the major scale. Now I think what's important is to really be able to hear this. What sometimes happens, I think, with guitar players, and myself included, you know, that we try and run before we can walk, and we think that when you learn a scale, the objective is to play as fast as humanly possible and go through all of the notes, like just be able to play them all as quickly as we can. But the problem with it is we don't actually begin to develop any sort of connection to those notes. So I would suggest that the most important thing, at least initially, is to be able to play them and be able to anticipate what they sound like. So I know that's... So I can actually hear the sound of the notes. Because all the other modes, like the other modes, are basically that with alterations. So if we go through our playing it along one string, we find that there are 2 other major modes. There's one called the Lydian mode, which goes... the race 4, everything else the same, and the Mixolydian, which is the 5th mode, which has the flat 7. Okay. Now, if I can hear that, if I can go, what does a sharp 4 sound like? That's the sound. I should be able to anticipate what that sounds like before I play it. That's that sound. Now, if I can't hear that without the guitar, if I can't go do-do-do-do, I'm kind of guessing, you know. So there's no way when I hear, you know, Frank Zappa or whatever play with the Lydian mode, I'm going to be able to identify it. I'm going to have to get the music out, or I'm going to have to ask someone else and go, what's that scale he's playing? Which isn't good enough, you know. You want to be able to hear these things. You need to be able to hear it when it goes by, be able to recognize it. And the way to do that is by recognizing the intervals. Now, the way I see the major modes is I see them as being what is common and what is different. So you have to recognize 3 things in a scale. That is the notes of repose. So that's the major triad. The extensions. And then the potential tensions. Now the major scale's got a tension. The 4th, that. So if you hear that, you can hear that's a tension. It needs to resolve. Whereas the Lydian mode's got the sharp 4, which is an extension. So I can hear that's a potential extension, whereas the Mixolydian has got the flat 7. Now this might sound like much, but if you can hear all those notes, right, there's only 12 notes in music. Right, so there's 7 of them in the major scale, and a flat 7 of Mixolydian. So there's 2 extra notes, there's 9. There's only 3 left. There's only three notes left in music. Now, if you can hear those remaining 3 notes, then you've got the other modes licked. There's your minor notes licked, your minor modes, and then also we reinterpret the sharp 4 to a flat 5, and that becomes the Locrian mode. Now, the beauty of this, right, if you can identify the notes independently, right, it allows you to do 2 things. Well, first off, it means you don't need to think of the names of these things as they're flying by in a tune. You can just think of the sound of the extensions. And secondly, it means you can incorporate notes that are not in the scale. Right. So I use this exercise for playing non-scale notes, non-diatonic notes. So for example, say we're dealing with the major scale. So let's think of like what might be a bad note in the major scale, or something that if we put it into the major scale, it might sound like it might disturb things. So let's pick any of the missing notes. Say a note that's not in the major scale.
Not in the major scale.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the F.
Okay, so like a flat 2. So if I go, it sounds okay. So if I went,
what's your approach? How you're making melodies out of these modes and switching between positions?
Yeah, great question, and it's something I've thought about loads actually. So if I take something like say C, like the scale that you might play over C7, without wishing to get into too much into theory or whatever, it's C Mixolydian mode is the technical term, but basically it's a C major scale with the flattened 7th to go with the flat 7 in the chord. So the chord has this. So I can't go, because that's got a clash, and you're going to get those 2 fighting with one another. So we change it. So you can learn it as a scale. That's kind of like an exercise, though. It's not really music. So one of the things I would do is to be able to jump to any of the notes. So maybe go from the root to the root. And then go from the 3rd. So I can hear that. So I can really hear the 3rd degree, or the 5th. So then I can select them on their own. I can go 3rd, 5th, 5th, 3rd. Flat 7, 3rd, flat 7. So now I can be less, and I might maybe just go. That's still that scale, even though I didn't actually play every note. There maybe there was no root notes, I don't think, in that lick I just played. So I go. There's no root notes at all, so you don't necessarily always have to play every single note. You don't have to play them consecutively. So
stay in Mixolydian feel only. Just
yeah. So you maybe yeah. Yeah, I might go 6. So maybe I go. I can put notes in that are not in the scale, like the major 7, for example. So there's a few passing notes in there. Yeah, because the strong notes are... Well, basically what we've got is this. Root. I see the mode as being like different layers. Like, so going from the center. The center's the root. So no matter what, I'm never going to fail with. That's always going to be okay, right? Then the chord tones are the next thing. The triad. Okay, then I can add the extensions, the 7th, then or the 6th or the 9th. There's the 9 in there. Or the 6th. It's kind of like not such a popular note, but it was kind of quite often used by early jazz guitar players like Charlie Christian. Django. The 6th degree. So they're all in the scale. There's nothing in there that's not in the scale. But then I can add notes that are not in the scale, like the major 7. Or I can add the flat 6th. There's a flat 3 in there as well. Flat 2.
Emphasis should be in the strong notes.
Absolutely, yeah. So I treat it then as an 8-note scale. So rather than a 7-note scale. So say I put the flat 2 in, I've got. And I can do that with the 5 missing notes. So you end up with everything. So it's all.
So basically, to learn modes, is to learn these separate shapes and try making more intervallic ideas.
Absolutely. Do you know what? So you could do stuff like this. So let's say take all notes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, flat 7. So we take 3 of those notes. So maybe we'll take the 1, the 4, and the 5. Still in the scale. Or we take the 1, the 2, and the 5. Okay. Or then we take a 3 note. That was 3 notes. Let's take a 4-note thing. So maybe 1, 3, 5, 7. Or we could take 1, 2, 3, 5. It's all still in the mode. I haven't changed the scale. So if I switch between those, like 4 or 5 different things, I've got all these different sounds within that scale. Then we got 5-note things. So that was 2 notes. Sorry, that was 3 notes, 4 notes, 5-note things. Well, 5 notes generally tend to be pentatonics. But different choices. There's different pentatonic choices. You could pick different 5-note combinations. You could actually pick different combinations in each octave as well. So the idea is to forget about all this stuff when you play and then just try and think in terms of sounds. But so if I'm improvising over this, go. Playing that sort of 7th arpeggio, Mixolydian stuff, and then maybe I might even play some blues or maybe something in 5ths or 4ths. I'm not actually thinking, oh, then I'll do this thing and then this thing and that thing. That's kind of like in practice. So I think in practice, it's good to do stuff like take the scale, divide it into thirds, it's a 4th, 5th, 6th. You know, you get the idea. So into all the different intervallic permutations, those kind of things. Now that's not so that you can run the exercises, so that if I hear. So I used those ideas then in a more musical situation. Maybe I used them a little too much, actually. But the idea is that you work on them, like kind of doing verbs or whatever, going he said, she said, they said, we said, that, you know, practicing it in that way so that when it actually comes up in a musical situation, you can just do it.
Okay, I think this would be a great advice for people who to approach learning in a more interesting way, because learning just scales up and down.
Oh man, no, it's horrible. I mean, the thing about it is, right, is, you know, I see it at the school when they get, you know, we get guys in to do master classes and the students are kind of looking for some magic answer, you know, like so what do you play over like C7, you know, like they're gonna go, you know, I don't tell everyone this, you know, but there's this scale that only me and like all the great guys know, and it's a magic scale. Right? And this is what's going to do it. You know what they say it's C Mixolydian, and they go, well, your C Mixolydian sounds better than mine, and they go, well, that's because I've spent, you know, 200 hours going up in thirds, up in fourths, up in fifths, and so much so that then I can forget it. You know, that's the idea. You know, and I think there's no sort of substitute for putting some practice in. I mean, the beauty of knowing what you're doing, again, that theory thing, what I found with players who generally don't have a clue what they're doing, right? The players who just genuinely really don't know what they're doing. They're usually really great when they play like themselves, when they play that very particular thing that they're known for. They sound amazing, you know. It's like, just play like you, and they'll sound incredible, you know. But then if, for whatever reason, they're ever put in a situation where they have to play outside that, or they don't even do it, you know. I mean, Van Halen and Steve Lukather are really good friends. You know, Van Halen famously doesn't feel comfortable playing when he doesn't know what the rules of the game are, you know, when he can't control what the chords are going to be and, you know, the kind of rhythms he's going to play over. It's like, he doesn't feel comfortable with that. Whereas you stick a chart in front of Lukather and say, go, you know, give him a few minutes to figure it out, you know, go, that's this, that's that, okay, go, let's play, you know. Now, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination trying to compare the two of them or weigh them up against one another. They're just different skills, you know. They're just different skills.
Yeah, okay. Of course, they're both known for their original things. They do some few of your favorite licks.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean,
before you finish, I would like to say now, thank you very much for all your time. I think this is going to be great for everyone to watch.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's been fun.
We are very honored that
anytime
you gonna appear on this video interview for our website and all our readers. This is John Wheatcroft, head of guitar at Guitarist, and today is Tech Music School in London. Recently moved in Fulham, contributor to Guitar Techniques, Total Guitar, Guitarist, all other kinds of famous guitar magazines, and very good friend of mine, my ex-teacher. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So I'll keep the C7 thing going. Maybe what I'll do is I'll play some stuff. One of the things I like to do is I like to use the fingers and pick at the same time, but not necessarily to play country licks, you know. I use it for rock licks as well. All of them, yeah. So the trick is for me, it's kind of like, I suppose, to try and be as economical as possible. I don't see any point, like, if the pick's here, there's no point trying to use the fingers on the bass strings because the pick is the closest. Whereas if the pick's here and the notes I want to play are over here, well, they're already there. So it makes sense if I were to go, say I'm going to play a spread out chord, so like C, and I'm going to go something like that, but there's intervals. I can basically keep the pick in one place, and it means it's clean from this perspective. They're all different sounds, so if I go, can you hear the open tone on that? As opposed to, with the pick, it's a different sound. Now, what I do that someone like Brett Garsed doesn't do, he kind of like tries to blend them in, so that if he's playing an arpeggio, you don't really hear where the pick strokes land and which of the fingers. I kind of emphasize them, so if I were going you can really hear. Hopefully. You can hopefully hear which notes are with the finger, you know, because I'm going for that almost like, I like Albert King, that really like snapping the string against the fretboard. That kind of thing. Now it also works great for intervals, so if I'm playing, say, major 7, I might go. Those kind of things. So let's see major 7. wide space C major 7. So that's root 7 5th, 3rd root 7th, 5th 3rd root 7 5 3. If that makes sense. So it's almost sort of the way Eric Johnson does a similar thing, doesn't he, on Cliffs of Dover? But you can kind of play. You can play them as chords as well. So I can put these little fragments in to solo line. Do you see what I mean? Rather than to try and pick that, I mean to pick it. It'd be an absolute nightmare. Yeah, and then also these kind of weird. These displaced things we were talking about before. That kind of stuff. To try and pick that would be, well, I couldn't do it, you know, you probably could.
It wouldn't even sound as smooth.
Well, you can't mute, that's the thing, you can't mute. Yeah.
Nice flow.
Well, this is what you can do, you can mute the bass notes, so I can go, have that muted, because I don't have to move the mute to pick the next note. The high note can ring, so I can go. Which you couldn't do with picking because you would have to remove the mute each time. So it's kind of like the secret weapon. Yeah. Yeah. Well, for me, do you know why I found it to be kind of natural? Because it's basically the same motion as tapping. So if I practice this, well, I'd spend years going. So it's the same finger in the same place rhythmically. So to practice the old kind of, you can do. It's in the same place. So rhythmically speaking, it's the same. So it's actually the same place. Now the beauty of that is, you might think, well, just tap it, you know. Why bother playing a hyper picking? Well, the beauty of it is it doesn't really matter what type of amp I'm using. Whereas I found when I did lots of legato, man, I was like the fussiest guy in the world. I couldn't have done this today and just turned up and just plugged into someone else's gear. I would have needed to bring my own overdrive pedal and be absolutely set, you know, get the fret file out and, you know, the gauge of strings and the amplifier and what cable you're using to pick and all this shit. Like, it just makes such a difference because if there's not enough gain, the guitar doesn't speak. But I found with hybrid picking, you know, I could do this stuff without even plugging the guitar in, you know. So it doesn't matter so much.
Just come out.
Yeah, so to be able to do this kind of stuff with no gain on an acoustic guitar or whatever will work, whereas the tapping thing, it's amazing, you know, but I was so fussy about having a compressed sound and all the right mids and, you know.
So by knowing both, you can only be richer.
Yeah, well I tend to...
And then use whichever you...
Exactly. I tend now to really only do tapping things if there's no other way. Do you know what I mean? If I can't find another way, like there's no other way to go to do that other than tap. Yeah. You know, so I'm stuck. Well, I'm not saying I'm stuck with it. I love tapping, but if I can find another way, the problem I have with tapping is because I used to do loads of it. You know, tons of tapping. The problem I have is there's no dynamics when I do it anyway. It was just everything comes out the same volume level. So after a while, it's... And you think, for God's sake, do a bend or something, you know. Yeah. Do something that's going to change the dynamic contour. Whereas with hybrid picking, I find I can go from this stuff... It seems to work better. So I try and do the same thing with tapping. If I'm going to use tapping, I need to be able to get it in. And be able to get in and out. I'm not going to do anything where there's like 64 bars of tapping because, unless it's a preset thing, you know, like you've worked out a part of a song.
Point taken. All right, this was a great lesson. Thank you very much. I'm sure everyone's going to enjoy watching this and hopefully get a few useful advices here. So
great stuff. Thanks for inviting me. Cheers.
I don't want to take more of your time.
No problem. Nice
So,
one.
Yeah, we're looking forward to more of your material for our website, and thanks for watching. Yeah.